Before that time.
That's the physics behind, for example,
Another
reactions.
question,
Reaction to the actual change in
under
mass.
the ultimate question about
During
the problem
over the
of
course of
message
7 years,
down to
the book was put together.
Strange Fruit Redux, the pearl of young black boys in childhood education, is the title of a new documentary film, which was created by producer and educator Dr. Hakim Rashid. The film's focus is on the struggle to educate African American boys in their early childhood. The film also explores solutions to a systemic problem. Dr. Rashid and I will preview and discuss the film right here in the Scholar's Chair.
Let the conditions of inequality that we suffered under, when we are the oppressor, the dominant class, let's not impose that injustice on the others.
Anybody think that you could have a just system without giving women their rights?
Everyone has an opinion, and we sit around the marketplace and talk about opinion, but what is true?
With the shareholder, their goal is similar to the business, to maximize profit.
That belief becomes a context for a development of knowledge.
Say physics is the DNA of technology because the rules for how you build new technology starts in physics.
Because Quran challenges the people. It's not only the people of the book, it challenges Muslims.
We say secular, they hear godless.
Right.
What was intended?
Watch the Scholar's Chair every Monday night. And here is your host. Dr. Rashid, welcome to the Scholar's Chair.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about this new film that you produced, and I can tell you that it is one that has gathered my attention. What inspired it? How did the film come about?
Well, the idea for the film emerged from an article I wrote for the Journal of Negro Education back in 2009. The title was from Child Placed at Risk, from Preschool Genius. And I got the idea that it might be good to emerge, have some themes emerge from that film, and decided that one way of approaching it might be to do a documentary film. So, but one of the things I wanted to do was talk about a historical context for these issues and problems that young black boys are having in early childhood education. So I wanted the film to have that heavy historical context focus at the beginning.
With that in mind, let's talk about the historical context. Let us look at an excerpt from the film.
Contemporary histories of American education like to talk about the missionary movements and people came south to help people. But as educators know, as scholars know, this is not true. It is not true. Carter Woodson wrote a book called The Miseducation of the Negro. But a lot of people don't recognize that he wrote another book called The Education of the Negro prior to 1860-61. He was looking at education that we started during enslavement. So when people came from the North and other places to help black people, what they found was, thank you for money, thank you for resources, but what we don't need is you telling us how to instruct our children. We're very clear about that. That's a lesson we need to remember for today, because that lesson then traced through segregation. There was an inequality of resources, but what there wasn't was a lack of clarity about objectives. Black people put together Sunday schools, Sabbath schools, even the concept that we use today, a vacation Bible school. It's black control education. And in those places, they fused learning to morals. They collected those things. They said, you are responsible for the next generation of young people. And the whole method of instruction emphasized collective learning.
This focus on self-determination in education came at the end of nearly 3 centuries of the worst kind of bondage and dehumanization the world had ever seen. It set the stage for a relationship between black men and American education that continues to be characterized by oppression. In 1939, Billie Holiday sang about strange fruit. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, she said, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. As we move further into the 21st century, a new kind of strange fruit seems to have emerged. Young black boys hanging from the tree of the American educational system. a system that was never designed for their benefit, a system that crushes their dreams on a daily basis, and a system that serves as a pipeline into the world's most populous prison system. We cannot understand the perils of young black boys in early childhood education without fully understanding the historical and cultural relationship between men of African descent and those who kidnapped them, enslaved them for over 3 centuries, and subjected them to one of the most insidious systems of oppression that the world has ever known. The history of black men in America is a history of violence.
Dr. Hakim, you got the idea for the film that emerged from an article that you wrote in the Negro Journal, right? Or the Journal of Negro Education.
Right.
And the title of the
title of that article, I didn't get it right the first time, From Brilliant Baby to Child Placed at Risk.
Yes.
And it dealt with the perilous path of young black boys in early childhood education.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it does tie to a historical context directly to current events, current phenomena that we see in the streets today, police killing young black men.
Yeah, there's a direct link there that I think has to be explored, and we wanted to try to make that connection in the film.
Let's see another excerpt.
Indeed, from beginning until, some would even suggest until even now with the various forms of police brutality, it is a very destabilizing process psychologically. And I think often we look at the physical form but never really take a look at what does it mean to be mentally traumatized over hundreds of years. And so in psychology we have what's called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's generally when one has an experience in one generation, one experience of rape or some form of a near-death experience coming from a war-torn area, or being involved in a fighting situation where there is gun violence and so forth. But what is it called when you have hundreds of years of unchecked elements of near-death experience and even death in and of itself?
Interesting dialogue that Dr. Washington is telling us about. Now, the film is also highlighting some other issues of quality in early childhood programs. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the research is clear that programs in underserved minority communities, low-income children, have a lower quality of program performance, lower quality in terms of teacher preparation. And this is one of the things that we wanted to explore, because this is something that kind of drives the issue that we're dealing with.
And the issues as you see at the moment, just to open up the dialogue.
Well, I think that we're talking about lower levels of teacher credentials. We're talking about less resources. If you look at it across the board, we're talking about situations where, the teaching, the teaching crew, the teaching population, is not as well prepared.
Yes. So here is an excerpt where the scholar is talking about quality.
The question is, are our babies, when they're in programs that are of sufficient quality? And for African American children and families, the answer is too often no. And we know that that time, right, between when a child is in utero and the time that a child is 5 years of age is the most important in any child's life, right? It is a time where neurons are firing at the fastest rate, right? The synapses are going, and the foundation upon which all future learning and development is being formed. And so we have a responsibility really to ensure that all of our children are able to show up in the way that Asa Hilliard sort of celebrated, right? Which is to honor that I've never met a child, in particular a black child, who was not a genius. And there's no secret to how you support them. Asa said that we first acknowledge them as human, and then the second thing is that we support them with love. I think my addition to that would be that the third thing we do is ensure that they have a solid, healthy, early start. And so that's the first piece of that, right? And we have worked with the National Black Child Development Institute in particular to make sure that communities that have significant concentrations of African American families are armed with not only the information about how important early learning is and development at that age, but really where there are resources that they can connect to.
Study after study shows that the earlier a child begins learning, the better he or she does down the road. But here's the thing, we are not doing enough to give all of our kids that chance. Because fewer than 3 in 10 4-year-olds are enrolled in a high-quality preschool program. Most middle-class parents can't afford a few $100 a week for private preschool. And for the poor children who need it the most, the lack of access to a great preschool education can have an impact on their entire lives. And we all pay a price for that. And as I said, this is not speculation. Study after study shows the achievement gap starts off very young. Kids who, when they go into kindergarten, their first day, if they already have a lot fewer vocabulary words, they don't know their numbers and their shapes, and have the capacity for focus, they're going to be behind that first day. And it's very hard for them to catch up over time. And then at a certain point, I'll bet a lot of teachers have seen this, kids aren't stupid. When they know they're behind at a certain point, and then they start pulling back. And they act like they're disinterested in school because they're frustrated that they're not doing as well as they should, and then you may lose them. Every dollar we invest in high-quality early education can save more than $7 later on. Boosting graduation rates, reducing teen pregnancy, reducing violent crime. Students don't just show up in kindergarten, first grade more prepared to learn, they're also more likely to grow up reading and doing math at grade level, graduating from high school, holding a job, even forming more stable families. Hope is found in what works. This works. We know it works. If you're looking for a good bang for your educational buck, this is it, right here. So, that's why even in times of tight budgets, states like Georgia and Oklahoma have worked to make a preschool slot available for nearly every parent who's looking for one for their child. And they're being staffed with folks like Mary, qualified, highly educated teachers. This is not babysitting. All right? This is teaching.
Dr. Hakim, the film is not only dealing with problems, it is also dealing with solutions. Tell me, what are some of those solutions?
Well, actually, the first one we deal with is in the area of nutrition, and this is an area that's quite often neglected and not really dealt with, even though if we look back over the last 40 years or so, we see the federal government providing free breakfast, free lunch, and I should note that the free breakfast program was started by the Black Panther Party. And so this is something that we felt that it was important to deal with right off the bat.
And they started it 40 years ago.
Absolutely, over 40, yeah.
Yeah. Let's take a look at this other excerpt where we're talking about nutrition.
When you give a black male a formula that contains estrogen, which comes from the soy product, you set that young man up, and research shows this, you set that young man up to be angry, and in some cases to be depressed. When you start feeding black men specifically, but Africans born in America, particularly sugar. Sugar is the worst thing that we could have, although the blood needs to have sugar. Refined sugar. Why is that so difficult? It's difficult because of the fact that it has no nutrients, and it reduces nutrients. Sugar reduces the B complex. Well, why do you need B vitamins? You need B vitamins for your central nervous system, and you need B vitamins to assist in the breakdown of carbohydrates. So if you're not getting these B vitamins, then what does that mean? Well, that means that your central nervous system is off. So if your central nervous system is off and somebody's giving you sugar, then that means that you're going to wind up being overactive.
Dr. Hakim, we're coming from nutrition. Now we're going into the roles of the parent. Tell us, what are the critical roles of parents?
Well, you can't really talk about young black boys or young black girls, for that matter, without talking about the power of parent involvement. Yes. Too many parents just assume that it's the educational system's role to educate their children, and that's really just not the case. So one of the things that we wanted to do was talk about the way in which parents can and must get involved in that whole educational process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so we actually moved from nutrition. Now we're dealing with the role of the parent. Here is a look from Clint Smith, as he lectures at TED Talks.
All of my black friends were raised with the same message, the talk given to us when we became old enough to be mistaken for a nail ready to be hammered to the ground, when people made our melanin synonymous with something to be feared. But what does it do to a child to grow up knowing that you cannot simply be a child, that the whims of adolescence are too dangerous for your breath, that you cannot simply be curious, that you are not afforded the luxury of making a mistake, that someone's implicit bias might be the reason you don't wake up in the morning? But this cannot be what defines us, because we had parents who raised us to understand that our bodies weren't meant for the backside of a bullet, but for flying kites and jumping rope and laughing until our stomachs burst. We had teachers who taught us how to raise our hands in class and not just to signal surrender, and that the only thing we should give up is the idea that we aren't worthy of this world. So when we say that Black lives matter, it's not because others don't. It's simply because we must affirm that we are worthy of existing without fear, when so many things tell us we are not. I want to live in a world where my son will not be presumed guilty the moment he is born, where a toy in his hand isn't mistaken for anything other than a toy. And I refuse to accept that we can't build this world into something new, some place where a child's name doesn't have to be written on a t-shirt or a tombstone, where the value of someone's life isn't determined by anything other than the fact that they had lungs, a place where every single one of us can breathe.
Growing body of research on the importance of parents providing their young children with a knowledge of African and African American history and culture as a vehicle for promoting positive self-esteem and resilience. This can be done via exposure to literature, field trips, and day-to-day conversation. An American Psychological Association task force on resilience and strength in black children and adolescents noted that positive racial identity contributes to the strength and resilience of African American children and adolescents in several ways. Families, peers, and community systems embedded in Afrocentric cultural values and beliefs provide socialization experiences and enrich identity. A positive sense of ethnic self provides a buffer for individuals from racism and discrimination. Positive racial identity is associated with positive global self-esteem, which serves as a protective factor.
Another area where solutions can be offered is the area of teacher preparation. Can you talk about how critical teacher education is in the development of a young black boy?
Well, first of all, we have to keep in mind that the overwhelming majority of teachers in America are white females, and this creates a continual problem in terms of the demographics. Black children will continue to be taught by a predominantly white teaching force well into the future. They bring their own biases, they bring their own misconceptions, and unless there's something done to create some positive change in the area of teacher education, we're going to continue to create the same kinds of problems that we've been creating.
Yes, so the problem will not get better.
Right.
Let's look at an episode of the film where we're talking about and discussing teacher preparation.
This is the largest, most populous generation of African American children who has not had an African American teacher or principal, a model of intellectual authority that looks like them. You know, HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, are 3% of the nation's 4,000 colleges and universities. And we prepare about 50%, half of the nation's African American teachers. So when you're talking about preparing African American teachers, the group of colleges, the group of institutions, universities that are carrying that weight are HBCUs.
I think that the teacher preparation is a critical place for teachers to learn to understand children in general, all children, particularly black children, particularly black males. But it's also a place where they need to understand themselves as people, as individuals, as members of cultural and racial groups, and begin to understand and explore what they bring to the teacher-child interaction in terms of bias, in terms of beliefs, in terms of values. I also think teacher preparation is a place where students need to learn about institutional bias, and that it's not just individuals who are doing mean things to children or even good things to children. That it's about the ways in which institutions position their policies and practices that contain inherent biases. Testing and assessment is one place where we, have talked a long time about the presence, for example, of cultural and racial bias. So I think teacher preparation can do many things, and that really is the best place for it to happen. Before teachers enter the workforce, they need to understand that teaching is not just about learning to implement specific curriculum with children. It's about understanding institutional practices, it's about advocacy, and it's about understanding themselves as individuals, as cultural beings, and as members of a society where racism and race bias, if you will, just predominate a lot of what we do, and we're not conscious about it.
The film is also talking about the importance of mentoring in community-based organizations. Talk to us a little bit about that, Raheem.
Well, that's true. We talk about organizations such as the Children's Defense Fund, the National Black Child Development Institute, and we also talk about mentoring programs such as Concerned Black Men. Mm-hmm. These are critical programs in terms of a community response to this issue.
Mm-hmm. And here's an episode that shows you what's available in the community.
Programs that have enriched the lives of thousands of young boys over the past 4 decades.
We tutor and mentor children, provide homeless vets a place to call home, and help Americans build careers. Our grassroots work ensures people thrive in a challenging environment. Together, we can be a powerful force for good. Concerned Black Men was founded by 5 Philadelphia police officers who wanted to help at-risk kids. Since that time, we've grown to assist veterans and families. With 9 regional offices and 32 chapters around the nation. However, continuing our efforts depends on you too. Do something that matters. Become part of our movement.
Hakim, this is an excellent film. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you thought about this process. I mean, just educationally, what is your background?
Well, I'm a former preschool teacher. I'm a former preschool center director. I've seen so many of these issues, worked in research. I've seen these issues up close and personal. Yes. I'm a parent, I'm a grandparent. I have 7 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. Yes. And so now I'm beginning to see these things in another generation. So, I wanted to do something that would make a statement, about what is going on in this whole, area related to young black boys in early childhood education.
And the problem is systemic, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's just
Absolutely.
system-wide.
Absolutely.
What institutions would you focus our attention on, the community's attention on, to try to correct the problem?
Well, again, I think one of the things that we wanted to say in the film here is that this is something that's an across-the-board problem. It's going to take a community effort. It's going to take the efforts of people in institutions of higher education, people at the grassroots level. There's no one solution to the problem. We've got to energize parents. We've got to energize the community, and take a multidiscipline, multidimensional approach to the problem.
Yes, and we've had, I've heard some clips where this problem has been around for over 50 years, and the problem is that young African American boys are not succeeding in school, and they are being suspended at a very high rate throughout the country.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's one of the things that we highlight in the early part of the film, is that even if you look at preschool, the suspension rate for preschoolers in America is higher for young black boys than for any other demographic group, and the suspension rate in preschool is actually higher than it is at the public school level.
And the film gives a historical reason for this.
Absolutely,
and they also offer some meaningful solutions.
Sure.
Tell me, what other solutions would you recommend parents to take away from the film?
Well, I think particularly parents can look at this film and come away with ideas in terms of not only how they can be involved, but a holistic perspective, a historical perspective. You have to look at this issue in its proper historical context. The problems of young black boys in education, the problems of black boys in education can't be separated from what's happening and has happened to black men in America.
And I have noticed that this is one of the things that I gathered from the film when I watched it, is that there was a tremendous amount of scholarship addressing this problem, and it must stretch over 100 years perhaps.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that we talk about is some of the early research dating back to the 30s that talk about how advanced young black infants were in terms of standardized tests. But this is research that got buried. I'm not going to say it got buried in the textbooks. It never got into the textbook, so it was just buried, period. So we ended up coming to the 60s, for example, and all of a sudden we have all of these negative terms being used for black children: culturally deprived, disadvantaged, at risk. When really they've been brilliant children from day one.
That's what I was noticing in your film clip. Just in the near future, what are your plans for releasing the film?
Well, we hope to have a premiere in late March, later this month, in Washington, D.C., venue to be determined. And we're in the process now of negotiating with a number of national professional organizations to actually show the film at their conferences. We've got some of the leaders of these organizations in the film itself. Dr. Kevin Washington, president of the Association of Black Psychologists; Dr. Carol Day, president of the National Association for the Education of Young Children. Those kinds of organizations, I think, will be a great fit for this kind of film.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing it on release, and I can't wait to see it in further detail.
Well, I should note too that we hope to have its first TV premiere right here on CTV, and I want to thank you for your role in editing and actually co-executive producing this film, and the CTV staff here.
Super. Thank you. Thank you. We have been talking to a new film director and producer. This is a new film documentary called Strange Fruit, Redux, The Pearls of Young Black Boys in Early Childhood Education, where our guest producer and educator, Dr. Hakim Rashid, We want you to see more of Scholars Chair on your YouTube Read One Communications channel. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Feel free to email us at scholarschair@gmail.com. Thank you for being with us. Good night.
Hit it, hit it, hit it.
Amazing.